Thank you. Once again, this is Kevin Cardinale Shakama from Blog TV. Today I'm going to be discussing the very real and possible collapse of the US dollar. First, I'm going to go over a little bit of history about the dollar, so that everybody is on the same page. Comparatively speaking, the 1812 dollar to today's dollar is only 1 cent. The 1912 dollar to today's dollar was only 2 cents. You saw a huge decline in a dollar since 1971 when we went off the gold standard. That's right, under President Nixon, we were off the gold standard. And he repealed the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement, where foreign nations could redeem their dollars for gold. You saw a huge decline in the U.S. dollar with the institution of the Federal Reserve in 1913, ending 100 years of dollar price stability. The budget and trade deficit is at 1.5 trillion, with the Federal Reserve having the Treasury to print up $1 to $2 trillion annually. If you account for gold pricing, the Dow has declined steadily since 2001. From 1776 to 1980, our U.S. debt was at $8 trillion. That's 204 years. From 1980 to 2007, it ballooned from 8 trillion to 44 trillion in just 27 years. As I said before, the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement, the dollar became the monetary currency of the entire world. However, you now see large dollar holders are now exiting the dollar, since the decline of the dollar has gone down in the amount of 32%, especially Asia and Middle East. All we would need would be for somebody like Moody's to downgrade some of the financial papers, and you'd see a wholesale dumping of the dollar on the market. Some of these countries have trillions of dollars in monetary dollars. If they just dumped 10%, you would see a near collapse of the dollar. The trend now is to move to euros. Also, from 1776 to 1980, the debt was 1 trillion. From 1980 to 2007, the debt went from 1 trillion to 8.8 trillion. Let's talk a little bit about why there is a housing crunch and how that ties into the possible decline of the dollar or collapse of the dollar. For instance, you have housing mortgage debt went from 4 trillion to 8.7 trillion from 2003 to 2007. That's just 4 years. That's more than doubled in just 4 years. Household debt, that's credit cards, loans, car loans, what have you, is growing at a rate 10 times household income over the same amount of time. However, the Federal Reserve and the government have a continuing campaign to entice consumers to borrow and spend more, and more. Consider this, our mortgages that were due in 2006 were in the amount of $1 trillion. 2007, that ballooned to 1.7 trillion. And the rise of the actual rate was an increase about 25% to even 100% in their monthly payments to pay off their loans. However, the highest real estate foreclosures and drops occurred in the Midwest, where there wasn't a perceived real estate bubble. Now, the world market actually depends on U.S. consumption and buying. Any stop in U.S. consumption and buying would plunge the world into a recession, and we just saw that last year, from 2007 to 2008, where we had all of these huge bailouts. The real estate boom caused a lot of homeowners to use their homes as cash cows, taking out trillions of dollars in debt. That accounts for 68% of all U.S. households. Over the last 6 years, 30% of all employment, 30% of all employment in the U.S. was directly related to housing, construction, and brokers. With those layoffs, that created a national crisis. However, Bush never accounted for those numbers in his unemployment rates. A current trend now that's creeping up is the acceleration of delinquencies, defaults, and foreclosures. And that's forecasted to continue up to 2012. In 2005, household income rose 1.2%, whereas household debt rose by 11.7%. The Feds, after the dot-com $8 trillion collapse in the early 1990s, then shifted to prop the economy up to avoid the recession back then, to keep Americans buying and borrowing. As a result, for instance, in the subprime market, where you had people were buying houses for no money down, and say they were only 5% into a house, with a drop in pricing of just 10%, you're already upside down in your house. Home equity loans were used as cash. 40% of all homes bought in 2005 were actually by investors for second and third homes. With that gone, that created a huge deficit in the housing market. We can expect realistically a price decrease of 30 to 50% in the home values, and in some areas 50% to 80% in home values where you had a huge housing bubble, such as California or Florida. Dr. Paul Samuelson, a Nobel Prize winner, predicted a run on the dollar and a global financial crisis back in 2005. Peter Schiff, if you're familiar with him, is quoted as saying that Asia is currently supporting the U.S., but as soon as they figure out a better way, they will dump us, which will also plummet the dollar. The only reason the U.S. dollar hasn't been replaced until recently was due to liquidity of another currency. However, the euro is now capable of being as liquid as the U.S. dollar, with trillions of euros being available on the market. Currently, we're showing that we are spending $3 billion a day to keep our economy afloat, and we are doing that through borrowing. I'm going to continue on in the next video, and I'll dissect the Federal Reserve and show you why the Federal Reserve is not there to stabilize the economy. Thank you. This is Kevin Cardinelli.